since I'm doing a Dungeons and Dragons theme anyway with these recent videos, I may as well talk about the Edition Wars that so many people bitch goes on, yet I never see it. Then again, that might be because moderators control every facet of your lives, and you don't have the liberty to argue about Edition Wars. Even though I would like to see these Edition Wars, and I'm sure many other people would too. Not so much because, we want to be in the fray bitching about people and stuff, but we authentically want to see other people bitch about the editions and tell us their stories and, the shit they've had to gone through and why they hate it or why they like it and things like that. That's what conversation is about, and moderators don't understand that concept. They're not human, so they don't comprehend how socializing has aspects of conflict and aspects of common ground and aspects of opinion and things like that. So, onto the Edition Wars. I'm not quite old enough to remember First Edition. I was born in the 1900s, so, First Edition is completely elude to me. But I do know about AD&D, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, 2nd Edition, and to my knowledge, 2nd Edition is just like 1st Edition with a pancake on its head. And 2nd Edition is crap. Not for the reasons you might think. It's not crap because it's oversimplified for the DM manual. The Dungeon Master's Manual basically says, make it up as you go along. They give you some vague outlines for health points and attack bonuses and things like that, but for the most part, it leaves it up to the DM to figure out what the hell a monster does and when. And, for an expensive-ass book that's like this thick, I expect more than telling me to just use my imagination. Then why the fuck did you write a book? So that's one reason. And another reason is the severe class imbalance. The problem with older editions of D&D is that they always assumed that you were going to play from level 1 to level 20, like it's a fucking video game. They complained that 4th edition was like a video game, but yet older editions always presumed that you were going to level up manually. How is that not a video game logic? So, at low level, a lot of classes would get a bunch of shit, and the spellcasters were weak and pitiful, meh. And then, all of a sudden, it turned around, and the combat classes didn't get jack shit, and the spellcasters were doing everything, and becoming godlike creatures. So, if you were playing a low-level game, you stuck to non-casting classes. You stuck to fighters, you stuck to rogues, and monks, paladins, things like that. But then, if you were playing higher-level campaigns, you picked spellcasters. And you always were stuck having to end up doing both and playing it as it was written to level up. That way there was a sense of spotlight for every player, and that's bullshit. Just get it right the first time. And that's the problem. 2nd edition was just too simplified, and at the same time had just enough rules to make it imbalanced. It wasn't like some offbeat game like Paranoia where you just roll a d20 and go with it. This actually had math involved, and when you have math involved, you're going to have class imbalances. As said, there is no war but class war. So, we move on to 3rd edition. Shit's starting to get bad when Wizards of the Coast is involved, because Wizards of the Coast has this long history of being the biggest douchebags in tabletop gaming. 3.0, which was when I got into D&D technically, was pretty bad. It was pretty blatant, the class imbalances. It was definitely more refined than AD&D. The artwork was a lot better. It had a more interesting ring to it, but it had a lot of flaws, especially the more obscure material like psionics. No one even mentions 3.0 psionics because it was that bad. Because every single power source of the 6 schools had a stat relative to its dice check. And so a really, really strong person could use psychometabolism better than, say, someone with a high wisdom score that used better psychokinetics or whatever. And, you know, that to me doesn't seem like a bad thing in and of itself, but it really limited psionics. And considering in AD&D, psionics were severely broken, even more broken than normal spellcasters, and then to go from this, I think that's what happened. I don't think it's so much that the mechanics were so bad that nobody wants to talk about it. It's the fact that they went from one radical end to another, and they weren't prepared for it, and they butt hurt severely, and it scarred them for life. So, ever since, now DMs everywhere are too pussy to deal with psionics. They don't want to know about it, they don't want to hear about it. It's right there in the fucking system reference document, but nope, I don't see any psionics. I don't have those books. What the fuck's wrong with you? Just fucking read it. It's not that bad now. 3.5 was a lot better. There was more class balance, sort of. The weird thing about 3.5 is you get the best class balance when you throw out the basic player's handbook. If you just get rid of the basic player's handbook and stick to the other shit, like complete arcane, the psionics bullshit, tome of battle, things like that, you end up with a much more balanced set of classes and things. Unfortunately, that leaves you with only a handful of options because Wizards of the Coast just kept throwing book after book after book and never actually gave these classes the grooming that they needed. They never added upon that material. They just kept figuring that you're going to spend more and more of your money on some new shit, some new gimmick, some new theme to your game, and so what you got is like 200 classes with a handful of abilities, and meanwhile, all the ones that do get catered to, like the cleric and druid and wizard, which are all too powerful, they get everything. Every single fucking book gives them new options, new material, new spins on them, and they didn't need it to begin with. That was the problem with 3.5. And another problem was the fucking fan base. Richard the Rapist Buller is a 3.5 fan. His, you know, sexual, deviant, pedophile, rapist fan base likes 3.5 too. And that's why they refused to transition over to 4th edition for the Giant in the Playground webcomic. He claims that Order of the Stick was made during 3.5, and that's why, or 3.0 I should say, and then he transitioned over to 3.5, and he said that it would be too complicated to transition it over to 4th edition. I don't believe that, because he doesn't actually literally use D&D rules for his webcomic. He just doesn't like 4th edition. But because he's such a little fuckwit, he's such a little twat that, you know, wants everything to be politically correct, and you have to do as he says, that he just can't say outright, I don't like 4th edition. Because he doesn't want to alienate his 4th edition fanbase audience, which he's gonna fucking ban anyway. So that's what it comes down to. The fact that 3.5 has the worst fan base. It's the worst aspect because it's in that awkward teenage stage of D&D's life. It's not quite the old, middle-aged, I've already seen it all, 1st and 8 D&D editions, and it's not quite the young, the naive, still hopeful for the future 4th edition. It's that angst, questioning your sexuality. Who am I? I'm so emo. I'm bisexual. Fucking 3.5 edition. And there's a lot of things good about 3.5. Psionics being one of them. Psionics actually perfects the mana system and makes it pretty decent. Because what you do is you have to invest a lot of mana points to make something powerful. Like, let's say you were to cast Fireball. You don't just use 3 mana because it's a level 3 spell. More like you spend about 6 mana, and then that's only at the minimum caster level. Then to make it as powerful as it theoretically would be for a normal spellcaster, you have to invest even more spell points. And, you know, you can't be doing that all day long. You know, I've actually done the math, and you would only be able to manifest about 10 powers per day doing that shit. Which is still pretty good, but quite a bit less than your typical spellcaster. So there is no reason to suggest that you cannot implement psionics in your game. At the very least, it would be far more balanced with the other classes than with the spellcaster classes. It would have far more in common with, say, Tome of Battle, the Warlock, things like that, than with the Wizard, the Sorcerer, the Cleric, etc. But they don't want to think about that because the fan base, that's the 3.5 fan base. They don't want to think about anything, but they're liberal and open-minded. They want new experiences. But they can't fucking read a goddamn web page and learn, just take 5 minutes out of their time to learn how to add and subtract PowerPoints. Really? So, then we go on to 4th edition. I've talked about in the past the unethical standards, I guess you could say, of Wizards of the Coast, and why I despise Wizards of the Coast, what they did to the fan base, the way they banned everyone. It was like a fucking holocaust, and that's why I have bitterness toward 4th edition. But 4th edition in and of itself is not bad. 4th edition is actually a very well-balanced game, and in fact the fan base of that era, it's pretty decent. It doesn't have all the stupid assholes that make Mary Sue half-elf, I was raped as a child, so now I'm chaotic neutral, bullshit that 3.5 had. 4th edition actually has D&D players. Not necessarily good D&D players, but not that crap. 4th edition is for people that probably don't know jack shit about D&D, and that's who it appeals to, because it's practically not D&D, and that might be for the best. It might be for the best to deviate from that atmosphere and just make a new name for yourself. The idea that Dungeons & Dragons owns the whole entire fantasy meme is ridiculous, and they ruined it. So, in that regard, 4th edition is good. 4th edition is a fantasy generation type game. It's relatively good at it. It gives you some options, like it has a lot of the problems with 3.5, where they dump class after class after class without adding material to it, but that's because it's ran by Wizards of the fucking Coast, which are full of greedy assholes. And, but in general, it's a lot more balanced, and, if you want to be able to have a game where everyone's relatively equal and you're not having to babysit them and think about whether or not they can handle this encounter or some bullshit, 4th edition's the way to go. The problem with 4th edition, there's a lot of math involved. Now, it's not a hard game, it won't take much to understand it, but everyone has like 200 HP at first level. So, combat is going to be gruelingly painful, because not only do they have like a lot of HP, but then they have healing surges, and then there's modifiers to consider, and damage reduction, and blah blah blah, and most people do not want to go through all that, especially in a game like Dungeons & Dragons, where you want to fucking kill monsters, have sex with the princess, and move on with your life. And 4th edition definitely slows that down. It slows that down to the point where you could be taking on a couple of goblins, and it's going to take a fucking half an hour of dice rolls and consulting pages and things to do the math, and nobody wants to go through that. That's the one severe flaw of 4th edition. And it's a flaw I'm willing to live with, because for the most part, you can ignore it. But, a lot of people aren't. I mean, let's face it, if you want to quicken combat, as the DM, just reduce the HP of your monsters. Bam, he's dead. He's a fucking goblin. He doesn't need to last forever, and if you want to give your players a more gritty atmosphere where they can die too, just reduce their healing surges or something. It's really not that hard, but, it's the fact that a lot of D&D players really don't have a lot of imagination. Despite how this is a game about storytelling and making a character and, trying to get creative and do fantastic things with your mind and make up this cool atmosphere and make an awesome script, like almost like a cinema, but well, maybe not a cinema, but more like a improv. That's what D&D basically is. It's improv with your friends, and it's entertaining. But unfortunately, a lot of these fucking neckbeards don't have that kind of imagination. If they did, they'd probably be better with women. Because, let's face it, women love creative men. Who doesn't like creative people? You know? I love anyone that has creativity and has an interesting story to tell. But these people don't. You know, they're stale, they're stagnant, they're fucking disease-ridden vermin that, you know, just dwell in their basements, bellowing around, slurping on the floor like a fucking slug, eating their stale Pizza Hut pizza, whatever. And they don't have the mental capacity to think up an interesting storyline. And I'm not telling them they have to write the next, you know, movie seller. I'm just saying that they should make something that would be interesting. Even something mindless. Like a team versus team game. Why can't we play Halo Dungeons and Dragons? Where the entire premise is that we capture the skull. And the skull is a smart-ass demi-leech. A demi-leech is a floating skull that's a wisecracking, super powerful undead mage. And we have to grab this skull and possess it in order to learn the deep arcane arts of the occult. But we have to hold it for such an amount of time. And the other team wants it too. Because who doesn't want unlimited power? So we're fighting each other and shit, you know, trying to get this magical skull, and the magical skull's just laughing it up because, the stupid mortals are, you know, killing each other for my evil secrets, and, you know, so it's zany, it can be funny, it can be entertaining, and at the same time, you don't have to be a fucking Stephen King, you know? It's just a bunch of guys beating the crap out of each other for a magical skull, for some obscure secret knowledge of the dark arts type shit. And I just thought of that right now. So, you can't possibly tell me that, you know, Dungeons & Dragons requires 2 weeks in advance of thinking of a deep plot line, and your character has to make perfect sense and be consistent, especially when most of the D&D characters anyway are crap. They're all just stupid Mary Sue assholes that, I came from a broken background and I'm mad, and supposedly they're chaotic good, but the only thing good about them is nothing, because, you know, that's another thing. I fucking hate alignments, and not for the reasons you might think. Everyone hates alignments because it straitjackets my character. And what is good and evil? Morality is subjective. You don't seem to think morality is fucking subjective when it comes to banning people, you fucking asshole. No, they don't think morality is subjective. What they think is they don't like the fact that their character would be classified as evil. Because they are evil. Because they are pricks. And they don't know how to be anything else. They don't know how to not be pricks, so by extension, their characters are pricks, and that labels you as evil. Maybe not necessarily chaotic evil, but some kind of evil, because guess what? If I'm on your team, we're traveling together, we've been through shit together, you know, I've protected your life, you've saved my life a couple of times, and then, because you're having a bad day, you're gonna shoot a fireball at me because you're chaotic good. You don't know what I'm gonna do next. No, you're not fucking chaotic good. You're just chaotic fuckwit. You're chaotic big bag of dicks, and you should die in the middle of the night. And I will probably kill your character in the middle of the night. That actually happened to me in a D&D game, where me and this other douchebag were sneaking around under the basement of the bar to find this magical item. And all of a sudden, the monk, the lawful alignment monk, decided that he wanted the power for himself, and that I was not entitled to it, because I was a lowly rogue. Now, mind you, maybe this makes sense in character, because, you know, he's an honorable monk, and I'm just some lowly thief. What the fuck do I know? And, you know, but from a metagame perspective, I'm thinking, here we are being bros, and we can't somehow come to some kind of agreement that maybe we would use the power for the greater good, or at least get a bunch of bitches and hoes, or no. So, what ends up happening is he has this newfound power, but he still is bound by the laws of physics, and he's downstairs, and I'm upstairs. So, what do? Every time he climbs upstairs, I just push his ass back down. And he falls, blah, blah, you know, he tumbles down the stairs, and it's funny as hell, because there's really nothing he can do about it. He can't attack me, because, you know, there's stairs. How are you gonna maneuver on stairs, you know? So all he can do is climb back up angrily, and I push him back down again. It's fucking hilarious, and I'm pretty sure that should constitute some sort of damage, but the DM didn't give me that much. But he was very entertained by the fact that I left him in this proverbial mess, where all he could do is fucking come back up to get pushed down again, and eventually the other players are gonna find us and wonder why the hell are we having this bout like this, and, you know, I would explain it to them. So yeah, see, D&D can be fun. It can even be fun with dicks. But to say that you are somehow immune to the alignment system because morality is subjective, no, just stop being a dick, you know? I'm kind of a dick sometimes, but I'm a dick in a different way. I'm a dick in, I get what I want, and I better get it, you know? But I don't, you know, lie to people, I don't backstab people, and, you know, I don't try to excuse that in character, you know? That's no excuse, you know? It's supposed to be a game. It's supposed to be fun. I don't see anything fun about screwing other people over. If you think that's fun, all the more reason you should be evil alignment, you know? So, I guess that's all I have to say about the whole D&D thing. Just wanted to break down for you the different editions, the different types of people they attract, and the bullshit they all say, and none of it's true. You know, they feed you a pack of lies, and it's just the fact that D&D far and wide has a terrible fan base. And it's like that with most things. It's not just D&D, but it seems heavily saturated in D&D. You know, I've met comic book nerds, I have met miniature gaming nerds, I've met video game nerds, and none of them are quite as bad as D&D nerds. Why is that? Why is it even furries are not as bad as fucking D&D nerds? Furries are perverted and weird as shit. But they are not nearly as, you know, mean, they are not nearly as conniving, and they at least know how to shower. So, what's up with the fucking D&D players? And maybe that's why your parents are a little wary of you playing Dungeons and Dragons. It's not because you're going to worship the devil, it's because you're going to be a forever alone, fat neckbeard, making somebody's life a living hell because you don't know how to fucking act. That's just the reality of it. See you later.